Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Ravago Ballarat, and I'm the Director of Alumni Professional Engagement in the Alumni Affairs Office at UCSB. We're really excited to bring you this program today. I want to say a special thank you to Beth Pitton-August, who is our Director of Development for the Bren School. She was the one that introduced me to Dr. Darcie Collins, who's our moderator for today, and really got this idea going for this panel. So thank you to you, Beth. And of course, thank you to Darcie for rounding up all these fantastic Gauchos for a great conversation that we've got lined up today. So for those of you in the audience, if you have any questions throughout the event, go ahead and type them into the chat. We've got a packed schedule, lots of really great speakers, but we will definitely try to address questions throughout the event, and then also we'll leave some time at the end. So feel free to type anything that comes up into the chat. And other than that, just really excited to have all of these great Gauchos logging in from Lake Tahoe for our event today. So with that, I will now turn it over to distinguished Professor Dr. John Milak.
Well, thank you. First off, many of you know the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management, but just quickly, the purpose of the school is to help truly solve environmental problems, and very importantly, to train leaders, and many of you are in that capacity now or will become so. And so we really try to combine real progress and with real issues with people learning how and then leading in those activities. And a good example of that is Darcie Goodman Collins, who did her PhD with me in the Bren School some years ago on a local watershed and lagoon area, combining science and management. And of course, now she's the executive director of the League to Save Lake Tahoe. And as a member of the so-called Tahoe Science Advisory Council, I have the pleasure of interacting with Darcie regarding some of the issues at Lake Tahoe. Many of you, the rest of you, of course, are also somewhat connected with the issues there and elsewhere. So with that, I just want to pass it on to the panel and let Darcie proceed with the program.
Thanks so much, Dr. Milak. Good to see you, and it's good to see everybody here today. I've been saying for years now, since I've moved back to Tahoe, which has been about 8 years, that I have watched and either followed or brought with me a ton of UCSB graduates. And it's just so interesting to see how there's a migration up to Tahoe, either directly from Santa Barbara or by way of other places along the way. And we'll get the opportunity today to chat with our panelists about the route that they took to get to Tahoe. We've all taken a variety of routes, and they're all unique. Mine is probably one of the only ones in which I've come back to Tahoe as a full-time local, originally born and raised here. I was lucky enough to grow up in Tahoe. I was here through my childhood, and it really was that childhood that gave me this love, not just for Tahoe, of course, which hopefully all of you out there in the audience have had the opportunity to come to Tahoe. But if you haven't, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I may be biased, but I think a lot of people are. So I not only love Tahoe, but I just grew to love the natural world. And from an early age, I wanted to do science. And I was fortunate enough in high school to get the first internship at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, also known as Keep Tahoe Blue. So you may have seen our stickers around town, around the country, around the world. We're well known for that iconic slogan. And it was that internship that I had for a couple of years that really made me get passionate about policy and management and understanding how science wasn't, and should be translated into good policy. So that kind of changed my focus from just a pure science interest to an environmental management perspective. So everything I did from that point on was to get me full circle back to Tahoe, and lucky enough to take on my dream job, which I took 8 years ago as the CEO for Keep Tahoe Blue. And I've grown the organization and recruited a ton of BRIN graduates and UCSB graduates to the organization, but also had the opportunity to work with other fantastic graduates from UCSB in Tahoe. Because like I said, we all somehow found a path to utilize our experience in education in Santa Barbara to come to Tahoe. And the focus of today's panel won't just be about our education and what brought us to Tahoe, but specifically the roles that we've played in Tahoe in protecting the lake. So there's other graduates up here, but today's focus will be around the work that we have done over the years protecting the lake. And we all have been fortunate enough to get to work with one another in one way or another for different agencies or organizations. And now you'll get an opportunity to hear about the path of all of your panelists. So just to repeat what Karen had said, please type any questions you may have in the chat, and I will try and pepper them into the conversations that we'll get to have with our panelists. So we have a large panel, and I want to try and not only get through all of them, but also leave some time maybe for questions at the end, should we have time. So I'm going to keep each of my conversations with you all to about 5 minutes. And as I mentioned to the panelists earlier, I'm just going to go alphabetical order by first name so you know when you're up. So that has me starting with you, Dan Segan. And to start us off, Dan, would you just tell us your position now, positions that you've had in Tahoe that are relevant to protecting the lake and where you work, and then your background at UCSB?
Sure thing. So my name is Dan Segan. I'm a principal natural resource analyst at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. I'm lucky enough that it's the only job I've had since I moved to Tahoe about 5 years ago. And I graduated from the Bren School with a focus in water resource management in 2006.
So then, Dan, tell me a bit about what jobs led you to Tahoe since your time as a graduate at Bren, and what did you study at Bren? Just a little bit about the path that you took to get here.
Okay, so my path was a bit more circuitous than the one you described, Darcie. So after I graduated, I did about 10 years of international conservation work, working in all over Australia and then throughout the continent of Africa. And I think, around, 5 or 6 years ago, all of the travel from international conservation started to wear on me. We started a family, and I decided to start thinking about doing something more focused in an individual place and trying to focus on protecting a place that I love. And I think one of the many lessons I guess I learned from working with people all over the world is that the people that really get things done are people that have embedded themselves in the community, have really invested time and effort to building the relationships necessary to actually eventuate change in those areas. And so I was lucky enough to land a job at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, I guess 5 years ago now. And through that role, so the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is a bit of a unique beast. It was formed by an act of Congress and an agreement between these two states, California and Nevada, to help better coordinate all the different overlapping jurisdictions. So we're talking about federal, local, state, all trying to really save Lake Tahoe. So in this role, I had the opportunity to work with just about every one of the panelists here in some capacity. And the whole purpose of my job is to help the agency coordinate its science and monitoring efforts, and really to help integrate science into our decision-making process.
So that sounds like you're putting your Bren degree really into full effect. What were the compliments from your experience as a master's from Bren that has helped you be successful in your current role?
I think there's so many, it's actually hard to even know where to start. So I think the interdisciplinary focus to problem solving that the Bren School emphasizes is really one that's helped me throughout my career. So everything I do, or I touch on a lot of different disciplines in Tahoe, from managing the clarity of the lake, to managing our traffic problems, to thinking about air quality and the recreation experience. And I think one of the things that the Bren School really emphasized for me is that in order to solve a problem, you don't need to be the primary expert in the room, but you do need to know who to reach out to get the answers necessary to actually solve that problem effectively. And so the Bren School really prepared me by, I mean, this sounds silly, but preparing me to not be the expert and being comfortable being ignorant on problems and learning how to gather information as we go.
So I think that's probably one of the key things that at least I did, but probably a lot of Bryn graduates learned, was how to be resourceful. So as an interdisciplinary student, you learn that there are other experts you can turn to, and coming out of that program, we probably have a lot of resources just from our colleagues from that school.
I think that's true. There's actually another colleague on the panel that brought me to the Tahoe region. That's Dan Sussman.
So Dan's going to be next in my line of questioning, but before I move over to Dan, tell me one thing that you really, really miss about either the Bryn School specifically or Santa Barbara.
Oh God, I mean, the weather in Santa Barbara, you know, we always joke that the day you're leaving Santa Barbara, whether for a long weekend or for a week trip, was always the nicest day of the week. And so I've missed the weather in Santa Barbara, and I really missed the camaraderie of the Bren School. So I think it was just a unique experience to be able to arrive in a place. I was living in San Francisco prior to attending Bren, and just have so many people that were so passionate about saving the environment, but also open to making new friends.
And then what's your favorite thing about living in Tahoe?
I think summertime in Tahoe is my favorite. Really enjoying going to the beach these days.
Great, thanks, Dan. Now, I'm sure I'll come back to you with more questions, but I'm going to move over to Dan Sussman. Now, Dan and I have had a lot of similarities in our background that have led us to this day. And Dan was a past staff at Keep Tahoe Blue prior to me working there. And I think we both probably could say is great opportunity to utilize our Bryn backgrounds and to realize that we love protecting the environment and the policy and the science. What else have you done in Tahoe, Dan? And what are you currently doing? And then what were your other roles up here?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned my history there, because what really brought me to Lake Tahoe at first was working for the League to Save Lake Tahoe. I got hired to work on these volunteer restoration projects called Tahoe Forest Stewardship Day, and then was able to stay on as a full-time participant of the staff and really work on a lot of policy issues and projects related to anything from forestry, fire prevention, commenting on bicycle trails and multi-use projects and the like. But I felt like I needed a little bit more depth of my training to advance professionally. And so I then went to the Bren School after working for the League to Save Lake Tahoe. And after Bren, where I focused on water resources management, I came back to Tahoe, to the Tahoe area, and I am now a senior environmental scientist with the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. And so we are a sister agency under the umbrella of the State Water Resources Control Board, which is part of the California EPA Secretariat. And so here I can talk a little bit about what I've been doing here if you'd like. Yeah. So I started out at Lahontan working very much on Tahoe, working on the Tahoe TMDL in its later years of development. That's the total maximum daily load. I worked on nearshore issues, the nearshore of Lake Tahoe, aquatic invasive species, and then also some small restoration work and some work updating our basin plan. which is our code of ordinances. Then I switched and got a promotion to the senior position, which still sort of oversees TMDLs, but beyond Tahoe. So from the Oregon border down to the Mojave, and work on water quality sampling and restoration planning.
So what brought you then after the league to a graduate program at Bryn?
Yeah, one thing I liked about Bryn was, of course, the location, but also really the fact that there was a focus on a bunch that it was an interdisciplinary program. My undergraduate in environmental science was also an interdisciplinary, but to be able to really have a chance to talk to a bunch of like-minded individuals that some of folks were focused on the business world, and some folks were focused on water, and other folks were focused on conservation planning. Was really interesting to see how we had a lot of overlap, and really the core that you start taking there really feeds that as a baseline. I have found that I'm just going to anticipate your next question here, Darcie. You know, I find that in my work since moving back to Tahoe, I am able to really dive in a little bit more than I did at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, with a little bit more confidence in the both the depth and the breadth of the issues that I work with. And, you know, I mentioned a few of the things that I did earlier, both at the League to Save Lake Tahoe and at Lahontan. And at Lahontan, I've really been able to draw upon some of the stuff that I learned at Bryn, particularly, and I'm sorry to crib off of the previous Dan, but I work with a lot of folks that some of them that my programs overlap with all the other programs in my agency. And so I work with folks that are focused on wastewater, and others that are focused on forestry, and others that are focused on groundwater issues, among others. And to be able to interact with them all, whether they're scientists or geologists or engineers, has really been, you know, rewarding, and to be able to understand just enough to ask the right questions, even if it's an area of expertise that I might be on the fringe of. Yeah, that's been useful. And I guess the other part that maybe even more so I have taken and made use of is that, you know, at my agency, when we're developing new regulations or anything, we're talking with the public a lot, and really learning from different stakeholders what their interests are. And also we have a governor appointed board that oversees our agency and makes all of our the big up and down votes on our projects and our planning and what goes forward with that. And between the public and the board, there's a lot of different levels of sophistication on our different issues. And so to be able to take these sometimes complex science situations or complex policy questions and really work to distill it down in an accessible way is something that was emphasized a lot at graduate school.
And that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in my internship, was that scientists cannot always talk to policymakers and the public. So that gap can be huge. And I think that's one thing we definitely learned at Bryn, was how to communicate science to policy and how to just be better negotiators and communicators all around. One last question for you, Dan, before I move on to the next panelist. Dan Segan said that you were the impetus to bringing him to Tahoe. What did you do to convince him to come up here?
There was a new positioning open at TRPA. I was working on I was sitting on the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinating Committee, and one of my colleagues at TRPA had this position open, and so I sent it to the Bryn listserv, and Dan reached out to me. We actually had very similar group projects. Mine was sort of a continuation of his. And so we knew each other previously, and he reached out to me, and I gave him a little bit of a push, or maybe it was a pull.
So you're saying our Bryn network's helpful?
My goodness. Yes,
Which is a good segue into our next panelist that I'm going to question, and that's Gavin. So Gavin works with me at Keep Tahoe Blue, and he applied for his position. Well, it's been a couple of years now, right, Gavin? Although he was in Tahoe prior to taking the position, but his background and knowing through the network, Gavin's work, and knowing what his background was at through his master's program at Bryn was definitely one of the main reasons that we wanted him to join the team. So with that minor introduction, Gavin, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about your current role, your title with us, and what you're doing for us at Keep Tahoe Blue.
Yeah, thanks, Darcie, and everybody for making the time today. So my current role is Senior Land Use Policy Analyst, and basically what I do is policy analysis and advocacy. So look at, plans, projects, policies, anything that's coming up through any of our local or regional agencies that, could have an impact on the environment, and try to determine, how big the impact's going to be, if there's some advocacy we can do to make the project better, more environmentally protective. And with that comes a lot of communications, a lot of going to public meetings. I work with, everybody on the panel here and at some point. We've got 2 states, 5 counties, a city, countless, state parks, Forest Service, goes on and on. So there's always projects and plans coming up, and we do our best to make sure, like I said, that they're as environmentally protective as possible. So yeah, that's what I currently do, and I've been here at the league for, I don't know, last year's a blur, maybe almost 3 years.
Yeah, probably almost 3 years actually. Last year, I always forget that year.
I know, me too. Yeah.
And then you've been in Tahoe for a while before taking on this position. What other opportunities did you have that related to, well, environmental protection in general, but specifically to protecting the lake?
Yeah, this is the 3rd nonprofit I've worked for in almost 10 years in Tahoe. I got a job with a regional nonprofit that doing a lot of the same stuff, natural resource analysis, plan analysis, and advocacy all over the Sierra Nevada, and a little bit in Tahoe. We were based in Tahoe, and I worked there for about 5 years. Started as a fellowship opportunity that I actually got from my Bryn connections. Graduated in 2010 from the master's. So that was a great job. Really, really good way to start out my my environmental career. And after 5 years, I just kind of ran out of growth potential there, and I found a job in Alpine County, which is just the county to the south, but it has a tiny piece of it that's technically headwaters of the Upper Truckee, which is the biggest tributary to Tahoe. So count that a little bit working in Tahoe. But I was a watershed coordinator out there, so watershed monitoring and restoration, a lot of volunteer engagement. Really small underserved counties. It was a really cool opportunity to learn more about the water management aspect of it. And then, saw the job come up at the league, and known people that had that job and worked here before, and just thought it'd be a great fit for, what had become the combination of my skills and experience. And yeah, I love it.
One thing that might be good to add now for those in the audience that aren't too familiar with the complicated regulatory and organizational makeup of Tahoe, Gavin kind of alluded to it. Tahoe sits between 2 states. There's multiple jurisdictions with different authorities over the environmental protection of the lake. And Keep Tahoe Blue is the largest and oldest environmental organization that has been protecting Lake Tahoe since the 1950s. So we'll actually be celebrating our 65th anniversary soon. But I think this panel gives you a good idea of all the different organizations that play some role in protecting the lake. We really focus on water quality, and we have Gavin's role, helps us with advocating for good policy. We have community engagement programs and citizen science programs, but we work very closely with our agency partners. So it is a complex working environment, but as you can see, it's filled with great people, all working towards the same goal. Gavin, there was a question for you in the chat box. What has been your favorite project you've worked on so far at Keep Tahoe Blue?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh man, there's been everything is so interesting and has its kind of own set of wins. There's a big development project that's just taking place right now. They're building a new event center, which is a big impact, and we were really strong advocates for over a year. It went through a whole process of deciding how hard we wanted to push on the project, if we wanted to try to stop it, and decided to try to get as much out of it as possible. And we were successful. And that project will have to pay for parking management and transit service to offset their impacts, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the bar is pretty low here when it comes to transportation and parking. So it's kind of a first for Tahoe to really make a project a big project offset its impacts to that level and permanently. So that was a good one. And then I think working with our volunteers, we have people that they come to us with about what they think are environmental issues, anything from a boat spilling oil in the water to trees being illegally cut down. And having our connections and our influence throughout the lake, we're able to report that to the responsible people and get it taken care of, usually well and quickly. So those are always rewarding.
Great, thanks, Gavin. I'm sure I'll come back to you if there's time at the end, but I'm going to head on over to Katie, who has a different perspective of working in Tahoe. We heard from the public sector. We heard from Gavin, who works for, and myself that work for a nonprofit organization. And then from a consulting point of view, we have Katie. Katie, tell us who you work for and your position and how long you've been in Tahoe.
Sure thing. Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Riley. I am a senior associate and our habitat team lead for a company called Environmental Incentives. We are a small business consulting firm and a certified B Corporation. And our mission is to enhance the environment that sustains healthy communities. And so EI itself has had a pretty interesting kind of growth path since I've worked here. I've been at EI for almost 11 years now, which is hard to believe. And I am originally from Virginia. I grew up on the East Coast, and going to UCSB was what brought me to California. And then I, of course, fell in love with living in California. I wanted to stay here forever. I graduated in 2010 with a dual specialization in economics and politics of the environment and corporate environmental management. And was really interested in the idea of ecosystem services and ecosystem service markets. And so that's kind of how I found Environmental Incentives. And so my decision to move to Tahoe wasn't actually about Tahoe at all. It's like a little embarrassing to admit this, but I actually never even heard of Lake Tahoe when I got the job at Environmental Incentives. And so I had Googled it. I was like, oh, that place looks great. And moved here, and it is great. And like Darcie, I also started as an intern, and now I am a senior associate at the company. And so in my time here, we've grown from a little teeny tiny group of just 5 people to now about 70 staff members working across. We have 6 offices in the U.S. and South America and Africa. And then we also work with partners in 26 countries around the globe. So we've really seen a lot of growth and change, but it's kind of amazing for me to say that now because we really started here in Tahoe as a place-based organization. And our flagship program was the Lake Clarity Crediting Program, which was really developed in partnership with the Water Board and the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection to help to implement the TMDL that Dan Sussman mentioned. And so really working to measure pollutants entering the lake, helping to define credits to then be able to track progress and meet permit requirements. And that program was was officially adopted in 2011 and is still being implemented and is successful. So that's a really great success story. And then I've also done a number of other projects in the basin in Tahoe. I've done some work with Dan Segan's agency at TRPA and done some work around some kind of support and reporting work for some of the programs that Dan helps to manage. I've also done some work with the California Tahoe Conservancy on some climate change resilience research and projects. That was actually my internship project. But from there, we've really kind of taken this lens on how to do performance-driven conservation and really grown it into other parts of California and the world, and then other environmental issues as well. And I mentioned that I focus now mostly on habitat work. So I do a lot of work on Endangered Species Act requirements and working with the ag community in Central Valley to see conservation as a opportunity rather than a burden, but kind of still taking those lessons learned from Tahoe and kind of applying them in new ways.
One thing that's always excited me about Tahoe is, in some ways, we were very early on in the environmental scene. Dan mentioned that his agency was formed through a bi-state compact a while ago, 50 years ago. You just celebrated your 50th, Dan, not you personally, but your agency. And so in a lot of ways, we're a model. And a lot of other regions look to us for our successes and our lessons. And it sounds like that's what Environmental Incentives has been able to do, using a lot of their early projects based in Tahoe and extending it to other regions.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
What has been your favorite project, Katie, that you've worked on? It doesn't have to be Tahoe related, but in your 10 to 11 years at Environmental Incentives, what's been the most exciting?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I'll say I'm really proud of the work that I've done with the Environmental Defense Fund. They're one of our longest standing clients. And so we work with them on their habitat and ecosystems programs. And again, really that focus on working lands conservation. And so we've developed some tools to be able to measure the habitat quality on a piece of working land. And then are now kind of working to create incentives for growers to participate in conservation. A recent success is there's a new program in the state of California called the Regional Conservation Investment Strategies Program through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Basically a landscape scale conservation planning tool that's pretty new in California, but that allows some interesting new applications in terms of mitigation and permitting. So I was involved in an effort to do one of these RCIS plans in Colusa County up in Sacramento Valley. And that plan, after 3 years of hard work, was just approved. So I feel very proud of that, and nice to see something all the way through to its conclusion. And it didn't even have to take 20 years, which sometimes conservation planning can.
Wow, that's very unusual, because unfortunately, a lot of times it does take that long. That's exciting. Okay, I'm going to move to our last Bryn graduate on the panel, Maria. She has a very exciting job that I think everyone will find interesting. We get to work with Maria a lot, but not in the same way that we work with our agencies. So Maria, tell us what you do up in Tahoe and your title and how you got here, how you got to this role.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Mirtova. I'm the Executive Director of the Sugar Pine Foundation. The Sugar Pine Foundation is a small nonprofit. It's in forestry, so we're trying to save the sugar pines, which are a type of tree, but also other related trees, and we're doing so much but in forestry. So when Darcie said, how are you saving the lake? We're saving the forest around the lake.
Which helps to save the lake.
Which does, yeah, it filters the nutrients and erosion control, all of that. I also worked at Environmental Incentives when I first came to Tahoe, but my road to Tahoe starts even before that. So Darcie and Dan Sussman and I, we all took part in the Tahoe by Cow Environmental Exchange. And that's I don't think exists anymore. but
Sad
it
to know.
used to be, it was a nonprofit that took students from Russia and the US and a few international students. And we lived 6 weeks in Tahoe and 6 weeks at Lake Baikal and did environmental projects. And I did it as an internship in between the 2 years, my 2 years at the Brent School. So that is how I got to Tahoe. And actually at that internship, we did different projects. And the project I did in Tahoe was on sugar pines, and with this organization that I'm now leading. So I know I heard a lot of people started with an internship. I guess I started with an internship too. And after I came back to Tahoe after I graduated, and I kind of wondered between different majors. I mean, at Bren, I think I started out corporate management because I used to be in the corporate world before. Then I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll do political. And then finally I majored in conservation planning. So I went through all of them and wondered which one. And actually it is very fitting because now I run a nonprofit for basically conservation planning. Or at least conservation, not so much planning. But yeah, I did the project during my summer, and then I came back to Tahoe and I worked at environmental incentives, which I worked on the Lake Tahoe Clarity crediting program. I wrote the manual. Yeah, I worked on it for almost the whole year. That is a signature project of environmental incentives, and of course, as one of their employees. Actually, that was my project from when I was working there. I'm sure it got passed on. But yeah, I worked with the EPA and the Water Board. But I think before Dan was there. And then, and on the side, I was developing the Sugar Pine Foundation, because when I did the internship, it was just a 501c3 paper. It wasn't really very much an actual organization. So I started writing grants and trying to develop it. But for people who are actually unfamiliar with the Sugar Pine Foundation, or even what sugar pines are a pine tree that have really big cones. I didn't bring one to show you because I'm in Santa Cruz, but I have one at home, and almost everybody in Tahoe has one. They're very signature cones. They're big. In any case, they're also the biggest pine in the world, and they have these huge cones, and they're in the white pine family. And all white pines are threatened by a non-native invasive fungus called white pine blister rust. And we have 3 species in Tahoe: sugar pine, western white pine, and white bark pine. But sugar pine is the most well-known. That's why we're called the Sugar Pine Foundation. And what we do is we identify resistant trees, then we climb them every year and get the seeds, the cones, and then we plant seedlings in restoration projects such as fires. And Dan mentioned Forest Stewardship Day. I participate a lot with the league in Forest Stewardship Day, and I remember doing those. I've done at least 3 or 4 of them. And often we partner, not always. The league now has even another forest or volunteer event with also restoration in the spring, and that one is in the fall. So yeah, that's what and the reason how I even got into the Sugar Pine Foundation was climbing trees. I was like, climbing trees? Sign me up. I can do that. But now I do a lot of other things. And I work with volunteers a lot, like Gavin mentioned, the Alpine Watershed Group, and of course the League to Save Lake Tahoe. We do a lot of volunteer plantings. Some of the newest stuff, we're getting into drone plantings, which is very exciting and high tech. And because we're in forest restoration, and now the biggest, most current issue is fires and planting trees in fires. That's what we've been shifting towards doing, not just sugar pines, but replanting fires. And when I was at environmental incentives, I worked on a project with fires. It was analyzing the 10 biggest fires that year, which is about 10 years ago, and why they cost so much and how to improve the process of fighting fires and stuff like that.
Thanks, Maria. Well, we love the Sugar Pine Foundation, and I'm sad none of us have a pine cone to show everyone, but if you haven't
No,
seen
no
a
giant
sugar
one.
pine,
Gavin
look
has
it up.
one.
Oh, good.
Gavin has one. Yay, represent.
Yep, they're huge. They're
Huge.
everyone covets them around Christmas. Okay, Maria, I'll probably get back to you also with some questions, but I'm going to get to our last panelist, the non-Bryn graduate, but another alum of Keep Tahoe Blue, Marissa Fox, who practices law in Tahoe. So she has a slightly different path from all of us to Tahoe, but nonetheless has done a lot of work in helping to protect this particular environment and others. So Marissa, you want to tell us about where you work now in your current role, and then we can dive into your path here and your experience at UC Santa Barbara.
Sure. Well, thanks, Darcie, and I'm honored to be here with with all of you grad students. I graduated from UCSB in 2003, majored in business economics, and then studied law at UC Davis. I'm currently an attorney at a distributed law firm called Scale, which actually focuses in emerging growth and tech startups, but I'm lucky enough to be based in Tahoe.
And then I think your path in Tahoe kind of started with an internship as well that led to full-time work. You want to tell us a bit about what you did at the League at Keep Tahoe Blue and some of your other work in Tahoe after that?
Sure. So actually my legal path is a bit untraditional. I worked at a big firm for several years before doing corporate law, before burning out completely and moving to Asia, and where I did a lot of nonprofit work. And started a nonprofit, which is off doing awesome things, and found myself in Tahoe looking for a place to volunteer and give back to the community, and met Darcie and ultimately ended up working with Darcie and Gavin as the League's legal and policy director. So my role at the League was, the policy work we did was really cool. We got some really innovative stuff on the ground, particularly relating to transportation, some really fantastic work. And, I also got to support the League in some of the, more non-sexy areas of work, like, brand protection and, ensuring, all the in-house legal was super sound. So it was really, really great to be part of that organization.
Very important work that we're grateful for. What from your UCSB undergraduate experience kind of started your path towards wanting to do law, or maybe even helped you decide that you wanted to do the nonprofit work you did before you got to Tahoe?
Well, obviously Santa Barbara is a really special place. Protecting the world's special places, I think, is a quality goal. I think the first time I was ever introduced to the Socratic method was in an economics class with a certain professor that was pretty infamous at UCSB. And I realized I had a thick skin, and I, really enjoyed advocacy and policy. And I think also the economics degree I got at UCSB was pretty phenomenal, particularly because especially in Tahoe, there's this false argument, I think, about whether or not you can have economics, economic success or, environmental protection. And Tahoe and Santa Barbara are both great examples of, you need both. Like, you're not going to have a good, thriving economy with an environment that's destroyed. So they're common goals. And I think the first time I learned that was in Santa Barbara.
And we're all kind of working remotely now because of the pandemic, but your current job enables you to stay living in Tahoe, even though it's a floating organization. You don't necessarily have to be based here. What has that allowed you to do work-wise, and how is it working remotely?
So most of my clients are actually based in Tahoe. As you were talking about before, we have this really complicated regulatory environment, which makes it, especially if you are unfamiliar with Tahoe, a challenging place to do anything with land. And, it's a good thing that it's regulated here for a lot of reasons, but if you're new to that party, it can be pretty challenging. So a lot of my job is, helping guide people through that process, and especially the ones who love this place as much as I do and just want to do the right thing. And then will come to me and ask me what I think the right thing is, and I have strong opinions on that. So it's a really fun place to practice law. There's never a dull moment. And I also get the chance to help local entrepreneurs start businesses in Tahoe, which means more locals, people doing really cool stuff. Katie mentioned trips for a B Corp. There's a couple folks in town I'm helping that are starting B Corps, which are really awesome efforts. So it's just a really, really fun, dynamic place to work.
Thank you. So I'm going to kind of try and get to some of the questions in the chat, and I'll guide the panelists in helping answer. But I am very grateful we have this wide variety of panelists and kind of all different angles, from the community base to the legal perspective, policy and agency perspective, helping to protect Tahoe. And I think we're just going to see more and more UCSB graduates coming up here. There was a question in the chat that I'm going to direct to one or both of the Dans about science, and how has science and data been incorporated to keeping Tahoe blue? And I could chime in there as well, but Dan Segan, I think it's specifically your role at the agency. You can provide us with some good insight to answering that question.
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in there. So my role, or the primary role or responsibility of my position right now, is updating the goals for our region. So Darcie mentioned that our agency is about 50 years old. And in 1981, so probably before most of the people on this call were even born, we adopted a set of goals for our region. And those goals really haven't changed since. So as you might imagine, 40 years on, many of those goals look outdated at this point. And so a lot of the work that we've done lately is to work with our science community to really identify what the best measures are for forest health today. So if you think back to forest management 40 years ago, a lot of it was just about fire suppression. And today, we really understand how fire works to shape the ecosystem, that it's a natural process that we need to encourage and helps thins out our forest. So defining the appropriate metrics with our science community is something that we've been working fairly vigorously on for the last 4 or 5 years. And one of the ways that we do that is through something that John Milak mentioned at the outset, which is the Tahoe Science Advisory Council, which is a 12-member panel of local science institutions that really help us sort through these really complex environmental issues and then try to formulate policy on the basis of that science.
And one thing that's unique about Tahoe is we have this really long set of data specifically focusing on clarity, which is partially one of the reasons that our organization, Keep Tahoe Blue, was formed. A renowned scientist, Dr. Charles Goldman, started collecting information on how clear Lake Tahoe was back in the 50s. And he noticed even back then that the clarity was declining. Used to be able to see over 100 feet deep, and now it's hovering around 70, give or take 10 feet or so, or take 10 feet maybe. And there's been consistent data collected on that particular measurement throughout the year. So that's helped us in a variety of ways inform management decisions and make a strong case for, even though Lake Tahoe is still beautifully clear, but make a strong case that there are impacts and we need to reverse that decline. Before I move on to the next question, anyone else want to chime in on data and science and keeping Tahoe blue? Another good question. What opportunities are out there if we want to get involved in Lake Tahoe this summer? It's a good panel, I think, to ask that question too, because you've got a couple of nonprofits that offer volunteer opportunities. Maria, I'll hand it over to you after I make a shameless plug for our Keep Tahoe Blue programs. If you go to our website, which is keeptahoeblue.org, we have a ton of online activities and education and trainings. And then if you have the opportunity to come to Tahoe this summer, you can participate in numerous citizen science programs. And they focus on litter. We have a huge litter problem up here, unfortunately, that's been exacerbated this year by all of our visitors. Then we also focus on aquatic invasive plants that are in Lake Tahoe. So we have volunteers that help us record where those plants might be establishing. And you could learn how to do any of those programs online. And a lot of the programs on there, a lot of the information can be translated to your community. So if you're not fortunate enough to make it up to Tahoe this year, you can do some of them in your own community. And then there's been a couple of mentions of our Tahoe Forest Stewardship Day. We've had some abridged stewardship days this last year because of social distancing, but hopefully we'll be able to do some larger community-based restoration events. And then Maria, you want to talk about some of the opportunities your organization has?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, summer is not a great time to plant trees because it's too dry. And we plant in the spring and fall, so we don't usually have summer internships. But we do have still volunteer opportunities, such as we do some watering of trees once a week and monitoring of the different plantings. And we have tabling and campfire, at least not during COVID, but normally we do have such things. And leading hikes and things like that. So I guess you could attend a hike, or you can learn how to lead them, or come watering with us and attend tabling and information events. I think all nonprofits do that. So, and campfire talks. But yeah, I haven't been able to do a summer internship for People at Bren because we don't do that much in the summer, which on a personal level, that's good. I travel. So that's all from me.
Thanks, Maria. And then Marissa's also involved in another great organization up here, the Tahoe Rim Trail, which has a ton of volunteer opportunities. You want to talk about that, Marissa?
Sure, I'm a director on that board, and especially with all the use we've been getting on trails over the past year, they're looking for help with trail maintenance, stewardship, people just being docents, and reminding people to about how pretty this place is and how to keep it that way. And so all of that information is on their website. They're a great organization as well.
Thank you. And then any of the other panelists have anything to add that we might have missed? There's also a website called Take Care, which focuses on just general stewardship in Tahoe. So a lot of the organizations up here have collaborated for that campaign. And if you go to that website, which is takecaretahoe.org, I'll put all of these in the chat box. That also has a bunch of other opportunities. And there was a question from Charlotte in the chat box asking about how you get experience living in Tahoe as a UCSB grad looking to expand opportunities in environmental science and management. I think all of those things that we mentioned is, in terms of volunteer, great kind of segues in that might lead to internships and other opportunities. And I think TRPA has a pretty good internship program. Dan, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's summer programs available there for internships as well.
Yeah, we do. So generally we hire about 5 students, ranging from people that are mid lower degree to halfway through their master's or PhD. We hire them in disciplines from planning to transportation to watershed management to AIS. We are still figuring out what we are doing this summer with our internship program, but I would encourage you to check trpa.org in about a month, and I'll send it on to Career Services because we generally do. There are about 5 paid internships that we hire each summer.
Darcie?
Yes, Dan.
Assessment, there's There's a very active agency that we haven't been talking about today because none of us work for it, but the Tahoe Resource Conservation District has a lot of summer opportunities.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning them.
Yeah, they administer the watercraft inspection station so that boats that are coming into Tahoe can be inspected and cleaned so that they don't transport aquatic invasive species. And they have seasonal watercraft inspectors that looking at their website, they're going to start looking at those applications sometime this month. So TahoeRCD.org would be a good place to go for some seasonal employment.
And then there was also a question very relevant to encouraging young people to get introduced to and succeed in environmental careers. I'll come to you, Maria, after this, but besides all of these opportunities, which I think are great ways just to interact with other professionals in the field, there are some good environmental classes at the community college. And that's a good way to take some of those field classes and learn about hands-on environmental work and get introduced to some more individuals. And that's the Lake Tahoe Community College on the South Shore. I think there's also some probably opportunities at the Sierra Nevada College as well. Maria, did you have something to add as well?
Just in terms of internships, our partners at the Forest Service have internships, and often California State Parks and California Tahoe Conservancy as well.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Is there anything?
Darcie, can I?
Yeah, Gavin.
I just want to put in a plug for the AmeriCorps program.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too.
A little bit longer term. It runs about the same term as a school year, but the Sierra Nevada Alliance runs the Sierra Nevada AmeriCorps partnership, and there's a few other AmeriCorps programs in Tahoe and near Tahoe, and it's like a 9-month, paid, lowly paid sort of intro job, and a lot of people springboard those into very successful careers. So.
And we've had a couple of AmeriCorps interns that have turned into full-time positions. And it is a paid internship, and it's a great program. Okay, is there any last parting thoughts before maybe Karen, I'll hand it over to you to conclude. Maybe in one or two sentences, I'm just going to go through everyone again alphabetically and give your well, I know I already asked this to you, Dan, but what's your favorite thing about living and working up in Tahoe? And Dan, you get to start again, and if you have anything to add from your original response.
I think my favorite thing about working in Tahoe is being able to dedicate my time at work to saving a place that I love. And then the best thing about living here is that you get to enjoy all of that year round. And every season in Tahoe offers something different, and it's always exciting. And thanks everyone.
Dan Sussman, what do you love about it up here? What brought you back here after living here initially?
Well, you're looking at it right now, both behind you in the picture and also all the faces here. One of the things that brought me back was that I knew that there was a good community here, and I already had some access to it, some of the people that are just wonderful. And so the people and the place both brought me back.
And Gavin, how about you?
Yeah, I love it here. Living wise, I love the mountains and like a smaller town, and winter is my favorite. So that's just great. And then working for a place-based nonprofit is just so rewarding. And I think you're kind of hearing it from everybody today, but actually seeing an impact from your work, and then it's great, and especially a place you really, really care about. So
thanks, Gavin. Katie?
Yeah, this is pretty similar, but I really appreciate that Tahoe is like a small, tight-knit community. And I feel like it's a place where a small number of dedicated people can really make a big difference. And I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., so sort of like hard to move that machine. But in a small town, you really can, make real progress steps, which that's why I find that exciting. And then also just Tahoe has the most incredible access to nature of any place I've ever lived.
That's for sure.
Maybe not Santa Barbara, maybe Santa Barbara too, but really incredible access to nature and the outdoors.
How about you, Maria?
I love powder skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, climbing, mountain biking. Do I need to say more? I mean, paddling in the lake. I just love it all. And about working, I just love that the forest is my office. I love that I get to work outside and actually look at that beautiful scenery.
Very lucky. And Marissa?
Yeah, I think, working here, you get to work with some of the best people on the planet, who are, my colleagues here, and on some of the most important issues, in my opinion, at least. And Katie put it perfectly, but you can really see your impact on those, and you feel like your work is meaningful every day. And I can go snowboarding in my backyard.
And for me, obviously all of those outdoor activities year round. There's always something different, right? When you start to get tired of the snow, then we get to switch to a beautiful summer. And then of course, I get to come back here and be with my family. And we are looking at a panel of transplants. So everyone on this panel came to Tahoe because they loved it. Well, a lot of the community I grew up with left and came back to Tahoe because of the great community that we got to grow up with. So we're building an even bigger and better community up here, and it's just been a great place to live and work. And I want to just thank everyone on the panel for sharing all of your experiences. And Karen, I'll hand it back to you to sign us off.